kind of what we did in last class. We were building that market for money. We talked about the idea of the price of money being captured as the interest rate, and we're working on quantity of money. And we went through kind of a little bit of what is money, and then talked about monetary standards, that commodity and fiat standard. I used the stopping in the video as an opportunity to go grab a dollar. I very rarely actually have any cash at all, ever, so this is actually super rare. But you'll notice right up here is what I was talking about. This is what makes us a fiat standard. This little writing here, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And that is it. That is the only thing that backs our currency, is that promise printed on the money right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Now that we have this idea of monetary standards, we want to categorize our money. I guess they don't really formally have a set in stone formal name, so I call them money liquidity categories. So basically, we are going to categorize money based on its liquidity. Now, I think a lot of you have probably come across liquidity as a term in accounting, finance, something somewhere else in business school. But just in case not, I thought I'd give you a quick definition for it. Liquidity refers to the property of being easily converted into cash. The property of being easily converted into cash. So when we talk about liquidity categories, we are saying how easily can this broad type of money, from our what is money last time, how easily can it be converted into cash? Today, there are officially two types of liquidity categories. That's actually kind of new, because whenever I was a student, which wasn't that long ago, we actually had three types. They switched and they kind of condensed types 2 and 3 in the kind of teens, or early teens, and kind of mushed those together. So I'll at least talk about that briefly as well. So we want to go ahead and divide up our money into types based on liquidity. Our first category, we call it money category 1, we're very uncreative, or we call it M1. M1 is going to be our most liquid. Again, effectively, we kind of think about this as how difficult would it be to, buy stuff with this. Effectively, there are usually 0 steps before buying. So what is our most liquid type of money? Another color. There we go. Obviously, cash and coin or currency, right? Yep, I think pretty much you can still take cash everywhere and buy stuff. So 0 steps before buying, it's most liquid, it's already converted into cash. What else are we going to include in M1? We are going to include what are formally called demand deposits. That is the formal name for your checking account. Yeah, again, 0 steps before buying. If you wanted to go down the street to Schnucks there and buy groceries, you can pay with cash, and you can write a check, or you can use your debit card, right? It comes out of that same checking account. No steps right away, you can buy instantly. This next one, we're going to include in M1, although I don't have a great reason why anymore. It was no problem 10, 15, 20, and earlier years ago, but I really don't know if this one still falls in M1, and this isn't something we revise too frequently, so maybe the next time they revise, they take it out of M1. But traveler's checks. So usually right now, I would ask the class, like, hey, how many of you even know what traveler's checks are? and it's like 5 hands that go up, if that, because most of us just, it's not something we utilize or use anymore. In the past, hypothetically, the name traveler's checks. So hypothetically, let's say you were going to go out of the country. Well, you didn't want to carry a whole lot of cash with you because if it was lost or stolen, it's gone. So you used to be able to go to the bank, and usually they were backed by American Express, but there were other companies that backed them as well. And you could go to the bank and you could give the bank your cash, and the bank would give you a traveler's check. It was kind of like a combination of cash and a check. So it was essentially a check written by the bank that had to be signed in multiple places. You signed it once when you were at the bank for your initial signature. Then you had to sign it in 2 other places as purchases were made. If you lost one, they all had serial numbers. The banks could void them out, effectively getting rid of them and giving you your money back. And there was a fee that went into that. But it was offering a little bit more protection for people who were traveling overseas and didn't want to carry large sums of cash. They could carry these traveler's checks for different denominational amounts. Now, whenever you came back from your overseas trips, what if you had them left over? No big deal. You could go still take it to Schnucks. You could buy, groceries, and they would actually give you cash back and change because it just kind of worked again as a kind of a combination between these two. Today, that is a lot harder. If you go to Schnucks with a traveler's check, they're probably going to tell you no, especially if it's in any denomination over, I think, $20. I can't imagine they would accept a 50, and I know nowhere accepts 100 ones anymore. The reason is technology has improved greatly. At the same time, our signatures have devolved incredibly. So the technology to forge traveler's checks and to effectively forge those numbers, those ID numbers, has really, really dramatically gone up. Our signatures have also gone down to the point where no one even looks at signatures anymore. That is not true in your grandparents' time frame. If you don't believe me, go ask your grandparent to sign something. It's going to be a pretty, all cursive, all the letters are visible, blah, 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 blah. And thus, whenever it was a lot harder to forge. And so if you were taking a traveler's check to a bank or somewhere, they'd be able to compare those signatures a lot better. I don't know what most of you guys' look like, but my signature looks like this now, which is relatively easy to forge. There's a D and a bunch of squiggly lines, and I don't even think it always looks like that. I know some of the sign with my finger, it's like, yeah. No one ever checks or looks or anything anymore, and because of that, these have really kind of fallen out of usage, and they've become a lot harder to buy stuff. Odds are there's going to be steps now, meaning you're going to probably have to take it to the bank, validate it, verify it, cash them in. So I would not be surprised if when we do start revamping these monetary standards, if that one falls out of M1 and falls into M2. All of my markers are kind of dying. M2 is our broad view of money. M2 includes all of M1 and our less liquid sources. With these less liquid sources, I know one of these markers works better. Give me a second to kind of try them here. With these less liquid sources, there's probably, multiple steps or some kind of time delay before you can buy. I left off before buying, sorry. So M2 is going to be our more inclusive, or kind of our all-inclusive, right? We're going to include all of M1, so all of the value, whatever dollar amounts these, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever dollar amounts are, we're going to include that, and we're going to include our less liquid sources. So probably our best example of a less liquid M2 source would be something like your savings account. I'll switch to red, keep my strategy the same. Your savings account is less liquid than any of these sources up here. Why? Because you have steps before buying. You cannot go down the street to Schnucks and you all have them. You may not have, you may have lost them or something at this point, but when you opened up your savings account, you were given a book where you could make savings, withdrawals, and deposits. So you can't take like that savings withdrawal form and write it out and give it to Schnucks. They're going to say, no, you can't get groceries. You have a step. You have to go to the bank first and withdraw the money from your savings account, then come back and buy groceries. And that's not the case with like your checking account. So you may have additional steps there. So the money in a savings account probably is a little less liquid. We're going to put it in our more broad view. It still meets all the qualifications of money, but it maybe isn't as convenient to buy stuff. So less liquid, it's going to get thrown into M2. We tend to put our other kind of our bank transactionals in here as well. So things like what we call money market accounts, not to be confused with the money market we're building. So a money market account is a type of bank account. It's kind of a combination between a checkings and a savings. It is a savings account, draws interest, and you can usually write 3 checks a month out of it. Before you have like a fee or a stop block, whatever, they won't let you do anymore. Maybe something like a certificate of deposit is going to be in here. So CD, not music CD, bank certificate of deposit. Again, you can't take your certificate notice and go buy anything. There's going to definitely be a time delay if you wait for it to mature. And if not, there's going to be multiple steps to cancel it out, as well as probably fees. I didn't put that in there, but that could also maybe apply in this idea of fees. We also, and this is where we made our distinction. In the past, you know, maybe with these, any of these kind of transactions, in the past, we used to kind of make a distinction of bank transactions that were over $100,000. We would pull that out. If it was under $100,000, we would count it as M2. So this may be something, again, maybe those CDs, maybe those money markets, or maybe even things like bond purchases or treasury bill purchases. Again, not stocks. Remember, we had already thrown those out a long time ago at the start of the semester. We said that's not part of GDP. It's not going to be part of this analysis. But any of those bonds, treasury bills, anything like that is some form of savings that was under $100,000 in the past used to be part of M2. We used to have, I'll switch colors here. We used to have M3. M3 does not exist anymore. They got rid of that in the mid-2000s. And we would put our bank transactions that was over $100,000 in here. Yeah, they said, no, we don't need to worry about that anymore. In today's digital age, everything is so easy to track. We can track and we can flag. They flag any transaction over 10,000 already now. We can track all of that. The time it takes is relatively simple. It's 1-2 clicks, boom, it's been transferred. So they don't include that anymore. They also in M3 used to include like foreign accounts. So any domestic money in a foreign account, fancy way of saying your Swiss bank account, that used to be in M3, no longer. Again, it's just technology, the digital age. You don't actually have to go, you can do all of your security checks online. You don't have to leave the country or anything like that. So that actually gets thrown into M2 now as well. So domestic money and foreign accounts. So we've gotten rid of this M3 completely and chucked all that into M2. As we build our money market, M2 is going to represent the quantity of money supplied in the country. So it is effectively the money supply, MS, money supply in our market.